big star out of me. Make a film about a man who's sad and lonely, and all I gotta do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star.
Hello and welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II right here on C19 TV, coming to you from the campus of Cleveland Community College. You can always check these shows out, of course, C19 TV, but also you can go online at c19.tv and check out all sorts of shows, including archives of this and a lot of the other shows that are broadcast on C19 TV. Glad to have you guys with us. Today we're going to spend some time talking about some of our favorite trilogies of all time. Really happy to have from Police Squad Lieutenant Frank Drebin. Frank, good to see you, man. Glad you're here. Man, your work on the police force, Police Squad, just completely blows me away every time I think about the attention to detail that you put with every investigation.
Well, for example, originally when I joined the force, I wore a trench coat but nothing else. But now I at least wear pants. So, and I have more of that Leslie Nielsen gray hair than I did at one time, too. Yeah.
That is Greg Tillman, of course, hanging out with us. And back on the Tim Cam, Tim Foster, you back there, buddy? Yeah, I'm glad. I wasn't sure. I know you've had a rough morning, and we're glad that you're here. Glad that you took care of those issues with students and other people.
Let me tell you how bad a day he's had. This is the highlight of his day.
Yeah. That's saying something right there, man. I'm glad I could.
He's been looking forward to this.
Well, Tim, I'm glad I could put a little love and a little happiness into your life, man. Well, last week we were talking a little bit about trilogies because we had talked about some films that we liked that were trilogies. One of my favorites, which we'll get to, was an animated film that really kind of blew me away from a standpoint of a character arc. And so we're kind of beyond the days now of what you would call traditional trilogies.
Right.
That used to be what you would think of. We still have films that are done in 3, but really now it's gone beyond and goes into just franchise.
As long as they're making money.
As long as they're making money, how much more can you add on to it? But we started talking. I said, why don't we do a show where we just kind of focus on some of our favorite trilogies? And some of these are films that became franchise films.
Right.
But in the essence of kind of that 3-film arc or a 3-film character arc, maybe some of these will show up on your list. We did research and went out there and talked to some film fans as well as film critics. And this list we're going to talk about today is a culmination of our thoughts as well as fans and critics alike. So does that give enough background, I think, for what we're trying to do?
Probably more than anyone cares about, but yeah.
Well, what do you think goes into a good trilogy, and we can even say into a good franchise of films?
Well, it all starts with the characters, and obviously a story that can actually expand the course of 3 films instead of stretching.
Right.
You know, some stories don't even make it through one film without feeling like it's stretched too far.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. It always comes down to the story.
I think so too, and I think you know, now we're in this time in filmmaking where right off the bat they are thinking, okay, as a 3-film arc, what will this look like?
Lord of the Rings comes to mind. They shot all 3 of them at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the way to do it. I mean, that's really the way to
But
do
if
it.
the first one bombs.
Well, yeah, but you know, but you can still always you know, let it air on you know, straight to Redbox. You know, I mean, there are places you can go to
Yeah.
it. There are some that were designed to be 3 films or more. Didn't happen. The Divergent series was a great example. It didn't make it that far. And I think, you know, to me, if you're going to invest in your fans, do a lower budget version. You can still make it happen. Get Jason Blum to come produce it. The dude he can do some great films with very
4 or 5
limited
people.
budgets. Well, let's give me something on your list of trilogies that you feel are some of the best movie trilogies.
The first thing that came to mind was the Godfather trilogy. You know, the first one, the second one, both won Best Pictures in 1972 and '74, I believe. Godfather 2 is generally considered the better of the two. And then another, 15 years later, Godfather 3 came out to lesser reviews. But the funny thing is, I was really young when I saw 1 and 2. Maybe I shouldn't have seen them that young, but I did. But to refresh my memory, when 3 came out in the late 80s, one night I watched the original, the next night I watched the sequel, and then the third night I went to see part 3 in the theater. And the story arc of Michael Corleone's life is just devastating.
It really is.
If you see it all fresh in your mind, like I did that last time I saw the 3 of them, it's just one of film's greatest heartbreaking stories.
It
really,
is. It really
for
is.
films that are so violent, it's hard to say it, to think of them that way. But it's just a beautiful piece of work taken all together.
And I think that's the thing. I think in watching that trilogy, watching them back to back to back, or at least really close together, I think really shows the impact of really, in many ways, a Shakespearean type tragedy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's on my list as well. The Godfather trilogy, well worth checking out.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
And if you have a whole day, watch all 3.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Indiana Jones, I grew up a big fan of the Indiana Jones films. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, yes.
Temple of Doom, and
Which is underrated, I think.
which is underrated, but definitely an adult film.
That
from a
spawned the
standpoint.
PG-13
Yeah,
rating,
it
didn't
did.
it?
It did. And then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Those 3 are an amazing trilogy of the action adventure films. And seeing Indiana Jones, the character, you get backstories throughout those. You get a little history of him as a teenager. I think those 3 films do a magnificent job looking at the maybe the middle-age Indiana Jones. Now, years later, when the 4th one came out, I'm pushing that one aside because we're just talking about trilogies. And I think the Indiana Jones films, just the music, the effects, the stories, of course,
Just
you've got
the
the
spirit
Nazis.
of the films.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to what really Lucas and Spielberg both wanted. They wanted these popcorn flicks to take people back to kind of their childhood and make them feel like children again. And I think the Indiana Jones trilogy actually did that quite well.
It did.
Yeah. All right, give me something else on your list, sir.
The Back to the Future trilogy. Back to the Future, to me, is one of the most perfect films ever made. The story, the acting, the style, the sense of humor about it, everything worked in that film, don't you think?
Oh, I agree.
And I didn't care for the second one as much when I first saw it, but I've seen it several times since, and it's grown on me. It's an odd film, and the third one's just a nice little way to wrap it all up.
Yeah, I love the first one, and I think the first one, I agree, is as close to perfect in filmmaking as you can get in a lot of different ways. The second one, I always said, is the longest coming attractions
For the third one.
for the third one.
Yeah.
It's all about setting up the third one. I was really disappointed in the second one because I felt like it was a throwaway film. But the third one, going back to the Old West, just really captured me and did a nice job, pulling that together. This is a film that I've heard people talk about, this franchise, the Back to the Future franchise. People have talked about, should we remake this?
No. That's
You
the
say no.
answer. I don't think so.
So you think it would be the same concept as if you tried to remake Ghostbusters? Oh, wait a minute, they did
Well,
try to,
you see how
they
well
did
that turned
try
out.
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are some franchises you stay away from, but if you think about the technology standpoint, we've advanced so much in the computer graphics and things we can do. I'd be really interested to see maybe not a remake, but maybe a reboot where you kind of look at it in a different way. I'm not opposed to it.
Well, the story opportunities are limitless
Yeah.
when you're dealing with time travel.
Absolutely.
But if you want to go down that road, just watch Timeless. I'll plug Timeless one more time.
Yeah, I think there are so many other different great time travel ideas out there. You can do anything
Yeah.
with it without having to go back and redo that. But you think about that franchise, Back to the Future. They had to go back and do reshoots. They recast. Eric Stoltz was
Yes.
originally going to be Marty McFly,
Yes.
and the chemistry wasn't there.
Have you seen some of those clips?
Yeah, I have. I have. And they stopped it, and then they started over again. And Michael J. Fox, you can't imagine that
Yeah.
without Michael J.
Yeah,
Fox
they
in
wanted
it.
him.
Yeah, yeah. So Back to the Future on our list of best movie trilogies of all time. I'm going to throw a film out there that's this franchise is not too old, and I mean it's not 40 years old. The Dark Knight trilogy, the Christopher Nolan take on Batman. I think talk about a character arc and understanding sacrifice versus selfishness. Looking at Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and then The Dark Knight Rises. I mean, it's really incredible when you look at those three films together.
Right.
So well written, the music, the set designs, the concept of this dark character, both from the alter ego standpoint and the anti-hero standpoint. I really love these films, and of course, getting an Oscar for Heath Ledger.
Oh, yes.
For his performance as the Joker, and so yeah, the Dark Knight trilogy on my list.
Yeah, I don't care how good the Marvel films are, and many of them are very good. The Dark Knight, that film alone is, to me, the best superhero movie ever. And a lot of that goes, not to take anything away from Christian Bale, who's perfect as Bruce, but Heath Ledger, you can't take your eyes off of him.
No.
And I've seen that film half a dozen times at least, and you just can't take your eyes off the guy.
It is amazing, I think, on a lot of different levels, and that second one easily could have been called The Joker.
Yes, yeah.
Because it was that story of the Joker, which, when you look at villains, you try to look at motivation, and with this one, and really, normally when I'm drawn to a film and I like the villains, it's because I'm able to see the motivation. With the Joker, the motivation was just because he can.
Yep.
And it honestly didn't bother me in that instance, and I think a lot of that's got to do with Ledger's performance.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, what else is on your list, sir, of the best movie trilogies of all time?
Okay, if we're ruling out certain other films, let's go with the original Star Wars trilogy.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with 4.
Yeah.
5's even better when you get into Empire Strikes Back. Return of the Jedi, it's okay. It's a good way to wrap it all up. Then, of course, it all got ruined a few years later until it found its footing again the past few years. But the first trilogy is about as good as it gets for popcorn cinema, I think.
Yeah, and it was, while Lucas had in mind doing these numerous films, there was a time we never thought we would ever see another Star Wars film after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It was all about taking the stories into graphic novels and taking them into trade-back novels. And all sorts of other forms, and of course merchandising never stopped with that. But I will agree with you, that is Thomas Manning's top pick.
Is it?
Is the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, he ought to know.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I mean, I grew up with that trilogy, and I remember people standing around the block watching that on TV newscast each night, where they were saying, look at this movie, it's a blockbuster. People are literally standing around the block just to get a chance to see this movie. And this was before we had thousands of screens across the nation.
No VCRs.
No VCRs.
No pay-per-view.
I mean, and at that time, HBO was probably very young.
It was.
This was a time period that, you had your 3 networks, and maybe a superstation, but
not
just
much.
Not much. I mean,
Not
your
much.
choices were going to the movies, going to the theaters, TV. And so when the big movies came out, people went to see it. It was Jaws, and then it was Star Wars. And Star Wars
no one
changed
has
it.
seen anything like Star Wars. Well, for the first shot in A New Hope,
Oh, yeah.
you just kind of get back in your seat. And I think by now anyone that watches this, does anyone watch this? Knows that I'm a nerd, but I saw it 7 or 8 times in the
I
theater
did too.
at the time.
I did too.
It's amazing I kept my girlfriend.
Well, I remember going to see it, and this was, before I could drive. I went to see it, and, my mom would drop me off at a theater, come back and pick me up. And I remember she came back to pick me up. I said, Mom, I want to stay and watch it again. I said, can I just call you on the phone when I'm ready to pick? So, so after watching the second time, I went to the payphone in the lobby, called her, said, I'm going to watch it again. So I watched it 3 times back to back to back. That's how impactful
Yeah.
that original film was, and the trilogy too. I mean,
Yeah.
I looked forward every time we knew a next one was coming out. We were there,
Sure.
waiting to see it.
Sure.
And what's great is this franchise, you know, while it has spawned some less than exciting prequels.
An understatement, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's still, I still love the fact that the stories are still alive, the
Right.
characters are still living, and now I've got a son who is excited about it as I am.
Exactly. I felt that way with my son.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, a few years ago
Yeah.
when it came back, these final 3 films launched. I remember going to the theater and sitting there with my son the day it opened, and just when that opening thing got you up, man, the chills. I had these chills, and that's to be able to recreate that in cinema all these years later. That's something special.
Oh, yes.
That is something
Yeah.
special. Well, we're going to. WG.org. You can always email us, info@c19.tv. Tim, still back there, buddy? We still got some time to talk more trilogies? No? Yeah, okay, all right. Greg Tillman over there, we're going to take an intermission, and we'll be back with more of our favorite movie trilogies of all time, as voted on by you and the film critics of Guam.
Hi, I'm Jackie Sibley Newton, the host of Experience Cleveland County on C19 TV, on Spectrum Cable, and also online at c19.tv. This is a show all about community partners, organizations, and businesses coming together to make this a better community to live, work, and play. So watch us every other week on C19 TV.
Hi, I'm Shara Miller, the host of Artworks. Each month we bring to you wonderful, talented artists from here in Cleveland County and the region. We have artists, we have potters, we have painters, we have musicians, we have actors. We just have wonderful artists that come to you and tell you about all that they're doing, their creativity, what inspires them. Join me here on Artworks each month on C19. You can also watch us online at c19.tv.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
Hello and welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. We are talking movie trilogies this week on C19 TV's Meet Me at the Movies. I'm Noel T-Man II, along with Tim Foster back there on the Tim Cam and Greg Tillman. Oop, I messed you up, didn't I, Tim? Tim thought I was going to go to Greg, and Greg thought I was going to go to Tim. So you're both here. We're happy you're here, and we're talking movie trilogies as voted on by you, the movie fans, and the film critics. So
And
thank
us.
you. And us.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're just the host. We don't know anything about movies. We're just hanging out and guiding.
Well,
and
that's me. You actually
we're,
know something
We're
about me.
facilitating.
I told someone the other day, I'm not a movie critic. I just play one on TV.
That's right. We're just facilitating the dialogue on movies and favorite movie trilogies of all time. I'm going to go back a little bit, back again to my childhood, and my grandfather and I watched westerns. We talked about this when I first started this show.
Yeah.
And that's why we got the Happy Trails theme, because that was one of my favorite, my grandfather's favorite memories. And he and I watched westerns. My grandpa, Earl Reagan, and he would watch the old classic westerns, you know, from 1956, The Searchers, you know,
Sure.
the John Wayne stuff. But he would also, really, any kind of Western that he would get a chance to watch, he would.
My dad was a lot like that.
Even the spaghetti Westerns, and remember the Man with No Name trilogies?
Yeah.
It was a spaghetti Western, but it had this Three Stooges-esque feel to it in elements of it. I mean, it had this kind of serious story, but they would do these fun, tongue-in-cheek segments, and it was just a blast to watch those. And I remember watching those with my grandfather, and he would just die laughing because it wasn't the typical Western, but still he got his,
Yeah.
you know, he got the horses, the cowboys, and the cowboy hats, and the saloon, the bar fights, all of that. But those movies were a lot of fun, and they were the Italian spaghetti Westerns.
I remember when those were out.
But I loved those films, and so the Man with No Name trilogy, if you get a chance to check those out, go back and watch those films. Now, there was another Western trilogy that my grandfather liked as well that I'm going to go ahead and...
That's where I thought you were going. Go ahead.
The Fistful of Dollars
Yeah.
trilogy with the trilogy, well, it's a whole series of films with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
And those were equally as impressive for different reasons.
Not as funny.
Not as funny,
No.
but Eastwood, you know, that's where he really started to kind of cut his teeth. I mean, he had done stuff before, but the Westerns is what today, when you think about Clint Eastwood, kids today can't even imagine that Eastwood was a Western star.
Right,
But he
right,
was.
right.
He was for a long time. Ended up getting an Oscar for directing one as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right, what's on your list, sir?
You know, I so want to say Star Trek 2, 4, and 6, but I know that really is a cheat. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
You know, maybe the Hunger Games. I
Okay.
thought that's more maybe the most recent thing on my list here.
Okay.
But I thought as a story arc that worked just fine. I guess that was really 4 films though, really.
Yeah,
wasn't
but
it?
still,
yeah,
it was.
yeah.
And that's where we get into
really
this
3
world
films.
now of you break up that third chapter into 2.
Yeah.
But the books, I remember reading the books whenever they were shooting the original film
Here.
in Cleveland County and
Yeah.
Shelby. And I was just blown away by the characters, by the story. You know, early on, the story was kind of this cross between the old short story, The Lottery, and The Most Dangerous Game.
Right.
And they, you know, of course, expanded upon that. But
And Katniss's character developed the way
Oh,
it
yeah.
should have.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it all came together well.
I think so too. And you talk about tragedy. I mean, that whole storyline, you know, the basis of it was based in tragedy.
Yeah.
And sure, it transitioned into, you know, some action adventure, but the bottom line of it was tragedy. And of course, the ending of it, you know, it's definitely not your Hollywood ending.
No.
On my list, only because, the first 2 were quirky, but the last movie sold me and brought me in. I call this the, what do I call it? The Evil Dead trilogy.
Oh, okay.
You know, the first 2 definitely had that quirky horror comedy element to
Yeah.
it. They were a bit cheesy. They were a bit out there, real low budget. But you get to the third one, Army of Darkness, and it took it into a whole other world, literally
Right.
into a whole other world. It brought in time travel. It was kind of one of these. What was that? The kid in King Arthur's Court. You know, the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. You know, it played off of all that, but within a horror setting with zombies from the past. But you look at those as a whole, you definitely see a character arc with Ash. And now there's a spin-off TV series based on this as well. So the Evil Dead trilogy is on mine, but especially the Army of Darkness.
I'm torn. I know we're running out of time. I'm going to throw in the original Spider-Man trilogy.
Okay.
I thought 1 was solid. The Tobey Maguire
Right,
Spider-Man.
Tobey Maguire.
And the second one with Doc Ock was really good.
I loved that one.
That's maybe not quite Dark Knight level, but pretty close, I think.
Yeah.
The third one had its problems. It was overstuffed and overwritten. But as a story arc and a trilogy, I thought it was really pretty darn good.
Yeah, I think it was pretty well done as well. I really got lost in the third film because I felt they were trying to do too much.
Yep.
Which is the case many times with
Pick a
these-
villain.
Pick a
one.
villain.
Batman.
Absolutely.
The Batman movies have historically had the problem. Tim Burton's did it.
Absolutely.
They have too many villains.
Too much going on. That was my problem with the third one. But yeah, I will say of the Spider-Man films so far, that is definitely one worthy of checking out. And we'll see what happens with Tom Holland.
Yeah,
you know,
he's good.
He is incredibly good, and so he's already had a trilogy of films. If you add in his appearances in other films,
sort of.
well, this one, if I don't mention this one, I've got a lot of fans out there of animation that will be upset. The Toy Story trilogy, even though they're working on a fourth,
Right.
that is as close to perfect in a film trilogy as I think I have ever seen, no matter the genre. And when you follow the characters in that, all of the characters, especially the lead characters, you see change.
Oh yeah.
And even the human characters within that, you're seeing lives change before your eyes. I remember when the third one came out, I was with a college class of film students who went to see it, and they were bawling because they had grown up with these characters as kids, and now they are seeing Andy going off to college, and they're in that same contemporary mindset, and yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful trilogy.
Yeah, it's funny. It'll break your heart. The
Yeah.
second one too, for that matter. All of them.
All
really.
of them.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what will happen with the fourth one. So I think we've got time for a couple more, maybe.
I'm going to go with the Hangover. No, I'm kidding. No, not the Hangover trilogy. I'm going to go with, and I haven't heard it referred to as the Glass trilogy, but I'm going to call it that. Unbreakable.
Okay.
Which is an underappreciated Bruce Willis M. Night Shyamalan movie, which turned out to be the first part of what became a trilogy when Split came out a couple years ago, which I thought was very good too. Glass, not quite as good, but again, as a trilogy, I think it all comes together relatively well, especially the first two films.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think I've got my problems with the third, but I will agree that as a trilogy of films, it does a lot with characters, a lot with story, and Shyamalan really is. He is a storyteller at heart, and I think you see that. I want to make sure I do mention this one before we leave, and I think this will be best trilogies of all time, part one, because we've got enough. We need to come back and do this again, because there's a lot that we did not get on the list. But The Lord of the Rings is a series of films pushing the Hobbit prequels aside, but The Lord of the Rings, it was a series that appealed to non-book fans of it, but it also appealed to those who read the books. Jeff Powell, who's been on this show before, general manager over at WGWG, a huge Tolkien fan, huge fan of the book series. And I remember going to see this movie, these movies with him. I would take him whenever I go to the screenings, and he said, "I'm happy."
Nailed it.
I'm happy. They did it. They did it. And so, Lord of the Rings can't leave that out.
And the last one won a slew of Oscars, right? Best Picture, I think, was one.
And it should have. I mean, technically, when we look at what's happened with motion capture now, Alita, we interviewed recently, Rosa Salazar. You think about Andy Serkis and the career he's had as just a motion capture actor.
Right.
Lord of the Rings was really kind of ahead of its time in doing that. So we'll be back, I think, on a future show to talk about more movie trilogies, because we've got a lot to talk about. But Tim, thanks for being here, buddy. Appreciate it. Greg, appreciate you as well. I do want to leave you with a movie quote, as we always like to do. This is from a film that a lot of people are not aware of. It's called A Tea and Sympathy is the name of the film. And this is kind of telling of this show and what goes on during the commercial break and behind the scenes. Years from now, when you talk about this, and you will, be kind. Be very kind. So for Make Me at the Movies on C19 TV, coming to you from Cleveland Community College, I'm Noel T. Manning II. For everybody here, thank you. That's a wrap.